Hello and welcome to the Shootsta webinar on video storytelling for brands. My name is Melissa DeCoster and I'm the creative content strategist here at Shootsta. And on my right, well, technically on the left is the lovely Olivia.
Hi guys.
Olivia is one of our customer success managers here at Shootsta in Sydney.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and for today's occasion, you're also my sidekick.
I am your sidekick. I think that makes me Robin and you Batman, right?
That sounds good to me. That sounds good to me. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks for dialing in, guys. To give you a bit of context, Shootsta is a subscription-based video production company, and we help brands all over the globe, create video content at scale. So I get a lot of questions from my clients about how to create or how to do storytelling for brands. So Mel, tell us why, how, and what we're going to do today.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of questions, so Olivia will be monitoring any questions that come through. So there is a little section on the side that allows you to put in a question. So please do let us know if there's anything that you need me to explain. That will come through to the lovely Olivia and she will flick it to me and I'll answer it right here, right now.
Done.
You excited?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
Let's go.
Let's roll. Let's have a look and see what we have on today's agenda. Right. So let's start with the first thing. It's breaking down the difference between a message and a story because there is a difference. So let's look at that definition first. Secondly, we're going to talk about the power of a story. What makes a story powerful? What are the elements that you need for that? Thirdly, the video types that work really well with storytelling. Very, very important to know as well because not every video needs storytelling or works really well with storytelling. And lastly, we'll be talking about tips and tricks on actually how to translate that into a video.
Sounds good.
Great, awesome. All right, let's get started. Message versus a story, that's a big one. Now, before we start deep diving into the specifics of it, let's define a story. Any idea?
How do you define a story?
Yeah, well, what is the difference?
Message versus story, I don't know, but I hope you back me.
Fair enough. So here's my take on it, right? So for me, a message is a verbal, written, recorded communication. Right? It's very to the point. It has one purpose, transferring information. Whereas a story is a way to convey a message. Very different, right? It's kind of like you're wrapping it in a certain way so that people, you know, it's more appealing, people can remember it better, and so on. And it uses narrative. Okay, now, if you're still confused, I brought two examples. And Olivia's already laughing because, yeah, I picked one of yours. I'm so sorry, I hope you don't mind.
Welcome to the Olivia show.
So if you're seeing double, it's okay. That's perfectly normal. All right, can you give us, before we have a look at your video, which I define as a message, give us a bit of context about that video.
So this is a kickoff call video. So we send our clients a little welcome message to welcome them to Shootsta. So this is definitely a message and we welcome them and tell them what they're about to do and what the onboarding experience looks like.
Great, awesome. Pretty straightforward. Video's quite long, so I won't show you everything, but I'll show you about 30 seconds to a minute. So let's have a look.
Welcome to Shootsta. My name is Olivia and I will be your customer success manager and key point of contact. Now, I'm here to help you achieve your content goals and change the way your team does video. Now, over the next 90 days, I will be guiding you through your Shootsta onboarding, which has everything you need to create high quality content, starting from the basics of strategy and storytelling all the way to shooting, uploading and sharing. Now, let's run through what's coming up. Firstly, we have a video kickoff call during which I will be asking questions about your brand, your team, and what success looks like to you. Now, during that call, I will also give you a quick demo of the Shootsta Hub where you will be managing your content. Next up, our team will be working on making you a logo animation. So Shootsta will design a fresh brand animation with lower third titles that will eventually go on all of your videos. Now,
okay, I think that was enough.
That's more than enough for me to see.
You did really well in that one. So, can you agree that this was more of a message than it was a story?
Yeah, there was things that need to be communicated.
Perfect. So, very simple, very straightforward, just to pass on information. Now, where's the difference with a story? Well, as I mentioned before, it uses narrative. I brought another example, and this one is by one of our clients, ACT Government. If you guys are watching, hello. So we really love this video. So they had a message which was for people to register their dogs, so if they would get lost, people can find them again.
I love this video.
It's such a great video. Anyway, so instead of doing it kind of like you did as a piece to camera, pretty straightforward, just someone explaining it. They went for the option, or they chose a story. Let's have a look. That gets me every time.
I love that.
And it's about dogs, right? It's super
Good job,
cute.
guys. Great video.
So the reason why it worked so well is because they used that story. They took you on the journey of that dog getting lost and being someone finding him and returning him home. So that is so much nicer, don't you agree?
Yeah.
It's just so much easier, and it worked really well. Okay, now that is absolutely the power of story, right? The ones that really touch you, the ones that cry, the ones that scare you even, right? That is what I define the power of a story. Now let's have a look. I find a couple of quotes, and the first one I want to talk about is by John Westenberg. Storytelling is the greatest technology that humans ever invented. I think that's a genius expression. Now let me tell you why, because if we think about it, we used storytelling way back when we were cave people. Right? Cave people. You know what I mean. So pretty much what I'm trying to say here is the way they told stories was really important, right? A story was for them passing on information on how to survive, right? How to survive animals, how to survive certain weather conditions, and so on. So what they did is they either used drawings in caves, or they passed it on generation on generation. Right? Very clever. Now, the reason why that works so well is because using a story makes it, first of all, really easy to remember, right? Especially generation after generation. You want to make sure the information stays quite consistent. Secondly, the second thing that a story does, it actually tricks your brain and your body.
Does it?
Yes, it does. So what it does with your brain is it actually, it simulates your brain on what it could look like in real life. Right, what that situation could look like, and it really triggers those emotions of being scared, being happy, and
being in that moment.
Being in that moment, absolutely. And here's the tricky thing, or the funny thing: your body doesn't know any different. How cool is that? So stories actually put you in that situation, but your body doesn't know. It still feels those.
And that's why you cry and
correct, absolutely. You know what is a really good example of that? Horror movies. Because if you think about it, it's a story, right?
Yeah.
It's scary. And I don't know about you, but I don't like them. And it's because they are scary and they do it really well. But if you think about it, there's actually no actual danger being present.
Oh, I don't know.
And that is the power of story, right? It gets you in that emotional state of happy, anger, and so on.
Terrified.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I brought another one as well. People think that stories are shaped by people. In fact, it's the other way around. Now, where we just discussed about stories being a vessel to pass on information, these days it's a little bit different. These days stories are really made to connect with people. And especially with the rise of social media, that became so important, right? Social media is all about connecting with people. And storytelling on social media therefore became a buzzword because it's such a great tool to have to make a connection with your audience. So it's a very important one. Okay. Now, what are the elements to a powerful story? There are 5, right? The first one is grab attention and keep it, right? If you can do that, that's one of the key elements to a good story. Secondly, a good story talks about a relatable situation, right? Something that you've done before, in a situation that you've been in before, or that you know that someone has been in, right? That's the type of stuff that we go like, hey, hang on, I recognize some elements in there. Thirdly, it's a memorable thing, right? The way, as we talked about before, it's the way we talk about it. It's the way we bring it. It's memorable. It's standing out. Now, on that, it's been proven that storytelling in video can be about 350%. That's a whopping number, isn't it? More effective than a message, right? To connect to people, to really bring that, make a connection.
My kickoff video, I think.
Let's keep that in mind, because actually I have a good point on that a little bit later.
There you go.
So keep that. Fourthly, actionable. So what I mean with that is good stories have a really strong action point that is needed from their viewers. That can be, hey, start recycling, stop wasting, start donating, and that sort of stuff. And lastly, it's shareable. It's really, a good story really has information that people think should be passed on. That whole passing on information thing again, right? So that is super important to make sure that it's absolutely in your story. Okay, any questions so far?
No, I think we're good.
Great, we'll keep
Keep
going
going.
then. Alrighty, so I brought an example.
You're different. You do things your way. That's what makes you one of a kind. You don't need things. You're happy with who you are. You don't care about money. You have everything you've ever wanted. You don't do it for appearances. You do it because it works. And this is not a car. This is you. It's a lifestyle. A choice. Your choice. Introducing a used 1996 Honda Accord. A car for people who have life figured out and just need a way to get somewhere. Luxury is a state of mind.
Isn't that great?
I want to buy that car.
Although it's that old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that genius what he did there? Even a tagline, luxury is a state of mind. I love it.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Now, so as you can see, this guy made a video commercial for his girlfriend's old car.
Very old
right?
car.
Very old car. But everyone was really drawn to it, and I'm guessing you guys were as well. Like, you really wanted to watch it until the full end. Now, using those 5 key elements that we talked about before, let's break that down for this video. What was attention grabbing here? The fact that they made a commercial for an old car. That is just unseen, right? So that was definitely something that grabbed my attention. Now, relatable, everyone probably has tried to sell an old car, and everyone probably knows it's not the easiest thing.
It's not that easy.
It's not that easy, absolutely. Memorable, I'd say the cat.
I love the cat.
The cat, the coffee, there were so many little elements, the details that really played a factor in that story, and what he was trying to do was really set that scene of luxury is a state of mind, and this was all about a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And the cat and the coffee were really elements that brought that in that story.
Yeah, that's her life, that's her luxury.
Correct,
It's great.
absolutely. You're selling a actually what he did is you're selling a lifestyle, not a car. So he did that really brilliantly. Actionable, he actually had, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, at the very end here, fine print on where to put in a bid on eBay. Brilliant, right? It was very clear on what needed to be done. And let me tell you, that car went for so much money.
Did it?
It got covered all over the news in America and beyond. Like, they sold that car
Get
for
out.
a ridiculous amount of money just by one story.
I'm
One
gonna
story.
find out how much that was.
And lastly, shareable. Who wouldn't want to share that,
share
right? Like, I would want my husband to sell my car.
Show
like
my
that.
mind, 100%.
Absolutely, great, awesome. Okay, so that was all about the power of story, guys. I think that was more or less clear.
I'm on board.
Great. Now, let's have a look and see what types of video work really well with storytelling, right? Because that is really important as well. Because my question to you, Olivia, does every video need a story?
I know you well enough to say that yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Are you sure about that?
I hope so.
No, I would say no.
I said no.
Yeah, I would say no. Look, everyone loves a good story, and that's clear within the examples that we've seen. Those are the ones that really, grabbed us and really created that emotional reaction. But no, not every video needs it.
Not every video needs a
No,
story.
and let me tell you why. If your topic or the subject that you're doing in your video is simple, it's neutral, and it's quite instructional, kind of like your introduction video, right? So we're coming back to that point earlier.
Yeah, let's keep bringing it back.
In that case, I would just stick to a message. Don't overcomplicate things, right? If it doesn't need a story,
Don't put it in
don't
there.
put it in there. You're going to waste a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's not going to drive you more. Let's say if you would have done your introduction video in a message, in a story.
It would have been so much more complicated.
Yes.
I think a lot of our clients come up with that as well, is that they try to make it this story and this thing, but it really could just be a simple 30-second piece to camera.
Absolutely.
Simple.
Absolutely, because it wouldn't given you any different results, right?
Exactly.
It might have even overcomplicated things and might have left your viewers a little bit confused.
Very confused.
Yes. So when it is very simple, neutral, and instructional, just stick to the message. Keep it simple. Now, for more complex topics, and not only complex topics, let me point that out, story works better because you can actually break it down, right? You can use parallels, you can use examples to make it clear. Stories are also great when you need an emotional reaction, right? That's what we've seen with the dog, and that's very powerful. And also when you want to make sure that people share it. Again, the dog video, that was the whole purpose, was for people to start sharing it around so that more people would register their dog. Right? Do you agree with that now?
I agree.
Okay, perfect.
On board.
Awesome. Okay, so
This
we talked about the difference between a message and a story, right? And we know that not every video needs a story. Now let's have a look at the ones that work with story. Before I actually give you concrete examples, let's talk about how we divide video types here at Shootsta. We use the Google model, and Google defines 3 types of video content based on what it is about, right? So hero pieces are typically the pieces that you need for broad awareness, right? These are your typical TVCs.
The big budget stuff.
The big budget stuff,
Okay.
absolutely. Secondly, there's hub content. Hub content is a type of content that you push out to your audience. Not necessarily something they would go and search for, but something that you want to communicate to them. For instance, business update, right?
Okay.
Thirdly, help content, or formerly known as hygiene content.
Hygiene content.
It's a funny name.
I didn't like using
Yeah,
that.
it's a funny name.
It's
Do you
hygiene
know-
because you need to do it every day, right?
Correct. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. That's why it was hygiene.
Got it.
Anyway, so it's now help.
That's
Much better.
better.
Much better. Absolutely. And that type of content is a type of content people do pull towards them, right? They do go and search for tutorials, how-tos, that sort of stuff, right? Now let's use these categories, and let's see how certain external and internal facing videos would sit in that overview. So when we look at hero, typically, as I mentioned, TVCs, that's what everyone knows. But it can also be recruitment videos. It can also be brand stories, product launches, etc. Internally, company events, mission core and values. My God, been a long day already. When it comes to hub, when we look at that, it's mainly thought leaderships, client testimonial, interviews, that sort of stuff.
Push out stuff.
Correct, absolutely. So remember, this is the stuff you push out. Internally, it can be a, hey, meet the team, hey, understand what this team does, staff profiles, and even behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. When we look at help content, as I mentioned before, this is a type of content that people pull towards them by searching how-tos, behind the scene product launches as well. Internally, typically they're training videos. Could be explainer videos as well, explaining what a certain, I don't know, department does within a business, or a certain product, how does it work, or even, for instance, in call centers, what needs to happen and how you deal with certain situations. Yeah. So that's a little bit of that overview. And each of these, I think, could really benefit from using stories, right? Now, a question that I get very often is, yeah, that's all fine, Mel. But like,
What's the budget?
what's the budget? Exactly. People think that, oh my God, stories are great, but like, especially when you look at, let's take the car video out of the equation for a minute. Let's think about the ACT government video with the dogs. That wasn't an expensive shoot, not at all. That was actually shot with Shootsta, so on the Shootsta kit within the Shootsta model. So it doesn't have to be expensive. Storytelling isn't about creating hero pieces and big TVCs.
Big scale production.
Correct. It can be as simple as doing an interview. And if you're not a great storyteller, just find someone who is. Seriously, find someone who is. Find someone who has a great personality. That can be a client, that can be someone within your business, that can be an
Always
actor.
someone in the office that's a good
Oh,
storyteller.
absolutely, absolutely. And just interview these people, right? Because they can carry that story throughout. Second thing that you can do is work with stock footage. I'm a big fan of that. Especially websites like Getty Images have a brilliant library and a huge library of really high quality footage that you don't have to shoot yourself. And it works really well for generic type of stuff.
Absolutely.
And also don't be afraid to use vintage footage that you have from the past, whether it is photos, whether it's video. Maybe your company exists for 100 years already, and maybe you have some old footage of you know, when the building was first built, yes, that's the word I was looking for. When the first employees started, maybe you did an interview with the boss 100 years ago. 100 years ago? Maybe not 100 years ago, but 50 years ago. So yeah, so don't try to focus on the fact that it needs to be expensive, because it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to.
Great. Any questions so far?
No, we're still good.
Still going great. Awesome.
Explaining it perfectly, Mel.
All right. Now, speaking of this whole how to tell a story, let's have a look and see how we should actually do it, right? And here's where we go into the fourth and the last chapter to this webinar. Now, building a story is what I like to refer to. I like to use the analogy of building a house, right? The first thing you do is pre-production. You make the blueprints. So you write the story, you prep for the story. Secondly, then and only then you take it into production. Then you start building the house. Because there's no, like, you wouldn't build a house if you don't have a plan, right? That won't work. You can, but it's recipe for disaster, I'd say. Definitely in modern times, no. Always have a plan. Same thing with video, always have a plan. So in production, you would go and film it based on what you've planned for. And lastly, in post-production, as with a house, is you decorate it. That's where you bring it to life. You put all the elements together, you put sound, text, music, and so on.
Beauty.
Okay, now, where do you think you should spend the majority of your time?
Well,
you should know this now.
I should know this. If I answer this wrong, I'm in trouble. I'm going to guess right there.
Right.
Pre-production. Because by this time, if you're still figuring out why or what your story needs to include and you're already halfway through filming it, you're going to be going around in circles, right?
Good girl. High five. Yes. Well done. Absolutely. Spend the most of your time here. Have that plan. My saying is, I really believe in fixing it in pre and not in post. Right? You take control as much as you can, and you're going to love it, because you're going to spend that time anyway, right? Because if you don't really have a good plan, you're just going to pick up the camera, shoot some stuff. You're going to struggle to put that story together, and you need to probably reshoot. Maybe just completely start from scratch again, and you would lose twice the time than if you would have spent a little bit more time in pre-production.
And we see that with a few of our clients.
We see that quite often.
They get to editing and they're like, oh, this actually doesn't meet what we initially wanted the video to be about. So Mel, with this, what percentage of, if just say your time was a pie chart, 100%, how much of it would you say should be spent in pre as opposed to the other two?
I'd say at least half.
At least half?
At least half, and the other half is what you do here.
Okay.
And especially with Shootsta, because with us, you don't have to do that. Absolutely. And you know what? This is great as well, because if you've done your pre-production really well, you have all those documents and you prepped and it's clear what you want it, it's not only helping you to have a kind of a tick list on what you need to shoot, but also it's a really good way to brief the editing team on what you're after.
Absolutely.
Because editors can get really creative and they can put videos together probably in 10 different ways.
Yeah, well, there's a million different ways you can cut something, so it's good you have an idea of it and you can just upload it at the same time with your footage, and then we'll absolutely understand what your video message was about from the start.
Absolutely, and definitely with stories. Definitely with stories. Okay, let's have a look. What's next? Okay, let's focus on that pre-production for a second. There's three things, right, to setting up a story. First of all, this creative brief, and here's where you ask yourself, should it be a message or should it be a story?
Not both.
Talked about. Not both, definitely not. Well, a message is part of your story, don't get me wrong, but as we said, story is a vessel of information. It's using narrative to convey that message. Setting up a storyline, so really mapping out that journey that you're taking your audience on. And thirdly, a storyboard. I'm sure a lot of people hopefully are familiar with that. Okay, let's have a look at that first one, creative brief. This is my holy Bible. And even personally, I never, even whether it's a message or a story, I always start with a creative brief. Why? Because it helps you to set that framework around where you want to go with this video, right? Because if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there?
It's a great question.
Yes. Yes. I'm starting to get a bit philosophical.
Yeah.
Anyway, so try to think about who's your audience, how are you going to reach them, or where can you find them? And obviously, thirdly, your message. Keep it simple. I've always gotten a tip by a director when I was studying, and he said to me, if you can't explain it very simple, so a 10-year-old can understand
explain it to a 5-year-old, yeah.
you failed. Start again.
Oh, God.
Yes. I'd say 10-year-old. I feel like 5 is a bit young, but a 10-year-old definitely. If a 10-year-old, if you would give them that creative brief and they can't understand it,
got it.
yeah, start
Cool.
again.
I think it's also important, and you'll probably touch on this soon, but it's also good to share with your team, because when you're explaining a story and that's with just in one person, if you've got a whole team, they might all be thinking different things about what this video will end up being, and then you've got too many cooks in the kitchen.
Absolutely, and that's what this thing is for. Let's say if we all think about the same story, that's pretty much what you were saying. We all use our own imagination of what that needs to look like. And a very typical example that I'd like to use is a cowboy shoot-off. Everyone has seen it, right? Everyone knows the traditional Hollywood scene with two cowboys taking on a challenge, right? So, but regardless of you and I thinking of the same thing, if we would start to storyboard that out, I might start with a completely different scene, back to back, or you might start, you know, walking towards each other. Very important to have that creative brief to really narrow down what it is that we want to communicate and how we want to communicate it. And a storyboard will obviously help with that as well. So keep your message simple, keep it positive, keep it on brand, and keep it authentic. People connect with people. They don't connect with things. And really keep it conversational. Okay, correct. Let's have a look. Oh, one more tip that I want to give here. If you, for whatever reason, you're in a rush and you can't do a creative brief, try to keep a few keywords top of mind of what you're trying to do during your shoot. That can always help. For instance, brand, location, experience. Those are like, depending on what it is that you're after, but I find that sometimes helps for me to really make sure I'm still on track. Okay, so first of all, we talked about setting up a frame. Now, secondly, set up a storyline. Map that journey out of where you're taking your viewer on, right? How do you do that? First of all, set the scene. Have a very clear, defined problem and have a very clear, defined hero. In the middle, have a really strong turning point. Make sure there is a solution, there is a contrast. And have a very strong end with a takeaway. What was the whole reason why you were bringing this story, right? Have a final outcome and have a call to action. Every story has a call to action.
Very important.
Very important. Whether it's direct, whether it's indirect, have a call to action.
What's an example of a call to action?
A call to action can be donate. And I actually brought a video for that. It's a video from Charity Water. So let's have a look and see what they've done to get more money to get people clean water. Cool. was.
So good.
So powerful.
What a great story.
Very good story. Do you want to donate now?
I do.
Very strong, hey.
Well, it's got a call to action at the end.
Absolutely. Let's break that down actually based on what we talked about earlier. Let's have a look at that storyline. So setting the scene, what they did there is they clearly identified the problem, which was the ravine, right? It shot the entire village off. They couldn't get any clean water. And the hero in this piece was people of the village.
People of the village.
People of the village.
Should have got that one.
Absolutely. Because the turning point was, and absolutely the solution is that they found out these drilling rigs couldn't reach them, but they were capable of bringing clean water, right? So they decided to build a road. That's the solution. And the contrast was that although it took them 2 months, after 2 months they had clean water. They had access to the drilling rigs coming in and being able to put in a well. The takeaway, as you mentioned, was clearly that such a small thing as a road can make such a big difference in getting, you know, access to water, like clean water, to these communities. And your call to action?
Yeah, the website.
The website, absolutely, to donate, that you can make a difference to communities like these.
Sure.
Very important, right? Okay, so really try to stick to this, guys. This is like a very simple thing. Intro, middle, end, problem, hero, solution, contrast, reason, outcome, call to action.
That classic
Like
storyline arc.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
what you're doing. You're building that arc. You're taking people over.
On a journey.
On a journey, absolutely. That's what it is. A story is a journey, right? Okay, perfect. Now, thirdly, so after you've created your creative brief, you set the framework, then you identified your storyline, so you've mapped out that journey, it's time to translate that into a video. Now, storyboarding, for those who never heard about that, it's actually frame by frame drawing what's going to happen, or screenshotting. It's a lazy mail tip.
Very lazy.
I screenshot things, so my drawing skills are
Terrible.
non-existing. So what I do is I screenshot existing stuff.
Yeah.
I take a photo with, my God, they started drilling.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but we're just going to ignore it for a second.
We're building an office downstairs, so they've just decided to drill in the middle of a live stream.
Great timing.
Perfect.
Great timing. Anyway, I'm just going to talk a little bit louder so to see if I can
Sure.
go past that. Anyway, so you guys get the idea, frame by frame, identifying what happens in each scene. Now, there's 3 elements, really important elements to a storyboard, and therefore to a video as well. Because you can do storytelling written out in an article or in a newspaper. Now, where's the difference with a video? It has visuals and sound next to dialogue, right? So you have 2 more elements that you need to make sure they stick together. And the reason why this is a triangle is because they need to be connected to make sure that your story is in balance, right? If you would end up using, for instance, if we go to the charity water video again, did you notice there was no spoken words?
There was no spoken words. No, it was just music, right? And text.
Absolutely. So you could say that they used less of the dialogue,
Sure.
but they used more visuals
Yeah.
to support that, right? And
Sound.
definitely sound. Sound is a really important one.
So you don't need to have all 3, but, well, you kind of do.
You
but-
do, but not to the same extent. So that's why it's a triangle. Like if you would flip that upside down, depending on how much you use, if you decide to use just mainly images, then you'll need less dialogue. But
You need
do
to think
sound.
about what you're going to do
Correct.
with the other 2.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about visuals for a second. Visuals, what I mean with that is trying to think about what you want to include and don't include in your video, right? Because if you think about very cliche and very old movie scenes, if someone falls from the stairs, you don't necessarily see that last trip.
When someone falls down the
Yeah,
stairs?
or like in a murder scene, like the very old school film, Hollywood films, you never see if someone gets stabbed or something, but you see the next shot where they're laying down and they're on blood, right? That's what I mean with included versus excluded. You don't necessarily need to show everything in order to...
For the story to make sense.
Correct. Okay. For the sequence to happen.
Good example, Mel.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like I've used a very few cruel examples today.
Yeah.
Anyway, camera. Try and think about where your camera is positioned, whether that is front on onto your hero or whether that is from their point of view. And especially point of view can sometimes be very powerful to really take someone on that journey and really make them feel like they're going through that same process.
Okay.
Right? Definitely, especially these days with like GoPros. If you think about that, that's really that point of view. I take you on this journey, and
So I'm pretending I'm there, really.
correct, and I'm jumping off a bridge or something and that sort of stuff. You know how people like use GoPros for that?
Yeah.
That's really what I'm trying to say. But also angles. Try to think about whether it's pointing down or it's facing up. Facing up makes you look more dominant,
Sure.
right? It's not always that
Not
flattering.
flattering, but
No. Pointing down is actually makes you very small, very humble, very marginal, so to speak.
marginal. Good word.
Yes.
Very good word.
Yeah. I do my best. Shot sizes, very important as well. Try to work with a mixture of whites, mids, and close-ups. So whites would be me head to toe, mids would be until my waist, close-ups would
Just your face.
just my face, maybe from my shoulders up.
Yeah. That car video showed a huge mix
Correct.
of all three. 'Cause
Absolutely.
in the details, it was all the close-ups, but then of the car driving off and the sunset, it was a wide shot. See,
You paid attention. Well done. Absolutely. And you know what that did? That created rhythm.
Yeah.
Right? So try to, when you storyboard, really make sure that you not just think about the scene and what's happening, but how big or how small that shot needs to be. Proportion is a thing as well. Any idea what I mean with proportion?
I'm going to guess the most dominant thing needs to be in proportion to the shot size in the middle of the frame.
To the story, yes.
Story.
So, absolutely. And that is actually a Hitchcock rule. Did you know that?
Alfred Hitchcock?
Alfred Hitchcock, my little friend here.
My mum's watching this. She's going to love this.
So Alfred Hitchcock, for those who have no idea who he is, he's one of the most famous Hollywood film directors, and he was a master in storytelling techniques. He was actually the founder of some techniques that are still used in cinematography these days. So his rule was that your object should have should be in size, proportioned compared to the importance to it in the story at that moment in time. So this is a screenshot that I took from one of his movies, and can you see how big that telephone is? So what does it tell
Huge.
us here?
That is the most important thing
Why?
in here.
What is it telling
Because
us?
Your focus is on that.
Correct. So what will happen?
The phone will ring.
Correct. Absolutely. See how that's a
Yeah.
massive indicator to how the story is going to go, and it really draws attention to,
focus,
oh my
yeah.
God, the phone's going to ring, and it's not going to be good, right? Because if you
Could
put
be good.
no, most of the times when a
It
phone's
is a
big in a
Hitchcock
shot,
film,
yes,
it's not good.
it's not good. Absolutely. Now, there is a second Hitchcock rule, and it's called assembly. And assembly has to do with the fact that you can't underestimate the importance of one image within your sequence. If you would swap that out, you have a completely different story. And instead of me explaining it, let Hitchcock explain it.
Oh, there you go.
Now, the third way is what one might call pure cinematics, the assembly of film, and how it can be changed to create a different idea. Now, we have a close-up. Let me show what he sees. Let's assume he saw a woman holding a baby in her arms. Now we cut back to his reaction to what he sees, and he smiles. Now, what is he as a character? He's a kindly man. He's sympathetic. Now, let's take the middle piece of film away, the woman with the child, but leave his two pieces of film as they were. Now we'll put in a piece of film of a girl in a bikini. He looks, girl in a bikini, he smiles. What is he now? The dirty old man. He's no longer the benign gentleman who loves babies. That's the difference. That's what film can do for you.
Or you for it, as it were.
What a genius.
That's great.
It's such a funny character, isn't it? Do you like the bikini in there?
I love the bikini.
So old school.
So old
I don't think
school.
that's on trend anymore. Anyway, so you get the idea. So one image, if you take that out, can really change the entire flow of your story and completely leave you with another idea, right?
Sure.
So with visuals, show, don't tell, right? That's the main thing that I want you to remember there. With dialogue is speak, don't write. Any idea what I mean with that?
As in, have actual text dialogue as opposed to on-screen written? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, almost.
Close-ish?
Almost. Close-ish. try to use words in such a way, in a conversational way.
Okay.
That's what I mean with speak, don't tell. Don't write like you would for a print article
Yes.
or a blog, because the way you write is very different to the way we speak, right? So when you do this, make sure you really put on your conversational hat, so to speak. The best tip I can give you is try to say it to someone, or write it in such a way like you would say to your friend, to your mom, to your neighbor, anyone that's really, you know, have really good conversations with. And that's just the best way to really get into that style.
Yeah.
Now, except for words, try and think about the tone of voice, right? How are you going to say these things? Try to think about your intonation, where you're putting the emphasis in a word, in a sentence, and try to think about the pace, because those things are all going to affect your dialogue, right? If I speak very slowly and very serious, that's an informative style. Whereas if I want this video to be very funky, I would speed up the pace, I would throw in a couple more words, be very bright, I would probably read it and say it with a smile to make it add some more warmth to it.
And it depends, I guess it depends on what the brand is that you're representing, I suppose, and what that tone of that brand is, to then replicate that in the text, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Here's a question for you, Liv. Dialogue. Do you think you 100% need it? So you know how we talked about that they're connected and that you need less or more. Do you think you could do it without?
Yes.
How would you do that?
Well, you could do it as in dialogue, as in someone actually talking to the camera. Is that what you mean?
So dialogue can be something that's been said on the camera, so that I can, for instance, like I'm doing here, piece the camera, looking into the camera. It can be an interview if I would look off to the side and just have it that style. But it can also be words on screen. That's a dialogue as well. It's a way to communicate.
Sure.
Right. So you don't necessarily always need it, but you'll need very powerful visuals and very strong sounds
to make up for it.
Okay. So my tip is always make sure you have a bit of all three. That way it's easier. And then you can start playing around with having a bit more of just visuals or having a bit more with just dialogue. Okay. Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. The third element is sound. Don't underestimate the importance of music. I see a lot of clients just saying, oh, you know what, just pick something. Really trying to think about what vibe you're setting here, because that is what music does. Now, obviously with social media, not everyone, especially on Facebook, has their sound on. But if they do, it's that third layer of communicating to your audience how they should feel about the whole thing, right? Same thing with sound effects. It actually, as a viewer, it indicates where you should be paying attention, right? Except if we think about the screenshot, Hitchcock, the phone, if that would start ringing, we know we need to look at that.
And
not
that
just
would be
visually.
the loudest sound coming out of... Yeah.
Correct, absolutely. And even silence. Silence can be so powerful as well, so don't be afraid to use that too. Now, a good example of all of this is, and I'll ask you, what is the most famous, the one scene that you can remember from the Titanic?
From the Titanic?
Yes.
It's got to be Jack and Rose on the door at the end when they're sinking, right?
Well, he's sinking.
Right?
Yeah.
That would have to be
very
the one.
iconic. Yeah. Epic. Anyway, so think about the music for a second there. What can you describe how? Do you remember what the music is like?
I haven't seen it in a while, but I'm sure it's not good.
Yes, it's quite dramatic. It's very sad.
It would be sad.
It's very sad. What does it tell us? That we need to be sad about that
Yeah.
scene. If the director would have picked another song,
an upbeat,
happy, whatever, happy, cheerful.
She's glad that he's drowned. Please leave me alone.
Yeah, well, that would need to be in the visuals, but you will actually have a disconnect with what's on screen, what the dialogue is, and what you're hearing. So you'll leave your audience so confused about how they should feel about the scene. So don't underestimate the importance of sound. Super, super important.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to recap a little bit, pre-production for story is hugely important, right? Creative brief, set that frame, know where you want to go with that video, right? And identify whether you need a message or whether you're doing a story. Secondly, set up that storyline. Really map out that journey that you want to take your audience on. Thirdly, translate it into a video, storyboard it out, right? Dialogue, visions, sound. Key things.
Lots of threes there.
Lots of threes. Rules of threes. Any questions?
Yeah, actually we do have a few coming through. So Mel, what are the best channels to share your stories on?
Social media. Any social media. As we talked about before, and I'm not sure if this person tune in a little later, social media is all about connecting, right? And that same thing goes for stories. Stories are information to be passed on to really connect with people. Again, people don't connect with things, people connect with people. And that's why stories can be so powerful. So 100% social media. On that, would that change the length of your story? Because obviously Facebook, compared to Instagram stories, are a little bit shorter. Instagram videos are a little bit shorter. So what is the ideal length then for a story? Any idea?
No, I was just about to ask you that.
Another question again. Very perfect. So for me, let it depend on the social channel.
Okay.
Work with what is more, what is best practice there. Now, in saying that, if you have a good compelling story, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People will watch it, but you need that storyline to be really strong, right? That setting the scene, having a turning point, and having a really clear, strong end call to action.
Cool.
Right? Any other questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one, and it says, "Are series of stories a good way to engage your audience?"
Our series of stories, absolutely.
Series,
yeah, 100%. And the same goes for books, right? There's a lot of books who work in series. Same thing. You don't have to just identify just a single story. You can keep building on it. Just make sure that each story has that defined storyline. So you need to wrap it up at the end, and then the next story can build on that. But you need to have always a start, middle, end for each story.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Good questions.
Great question. And here's another one from Alex. Any tips for how to find your brand story?
I'd say look at the people that work in your business, right? Because again, it's people that connect with people. Don't think about your brand as just being a brand. A brand is a brand because of the culture and the beliefs that you have. Here at Shootsta, so we're all very passionate about video.
Storytelling.
Right? We're all very creative. So our brand story is a little bit more creative, is a little bit more fun, and that really works for us, right? My best tip is, grass is always greener on the other side. Don't focus on what other brands are doing. Find your own story and play around with it, and you'll notice that at some point you will start to get traction. Just be authentic. Just do what you think really represents your brand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
It's a bit vague, but feel free to ask me an additional question if you have a more specific one. But yeah, definitely just go with your gut feeling.
Cool.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Any more?
Yeah, let's save a couple more for the end then.
Okay, cool. Perfect. All right. That was it, actually. So we're already at the end. So the summary, just to repeat, we talked about the difference between a message and a story, right? We talked about the powerful things to a story, and the 5 powerful things to a storyline. We talked about the video types that really work and could benefit from using storytelling, and we just talked about how to tell a good story, mainly in pre-production. Fix it in pre, don't fix it in post.
Cool.
Yeah.
One more question?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe
Let's have
two?
it. Let's have it.
If you're just starting out with video for your brand, what would you focus on?
For a brand video over storytelling, I think every brand should have an explainer video. Who are you? What should I know about you? And you can do that, as we noticed, like you can do that in a story if you have a relevant story. You could do that in a message as well. That would be the first thing I would work on as a brand, because that is the first thing that people Google, right? If they pick up on your brand, or even if I would introduce myself to, let's say if I don't know you, Olivia, and would introduce myself, hi, I'm Mel from Shootsta, you might go and Google that, and you want to make sure that if they type in your brand's name, that that video is popping up, that they understand what your business is about.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole strategy that Hero Hub help.
100%.
Kind of all 3 touch points.
100%, absolutely. Yeah.
What's the recommended length? I think you might have answered this one.
Yeah.
For a video story to engage and capture from Chrissy.
Just to the point, however long it needs to be. If it's for Facebook, I would say a minute, 2 minutes. It depends on what you're communicating. What is it that you're telling your story about?
You touched on this in your previous webinar about that 3-10-30 rule.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. So 3-10-30 rule is all about, especially on Facebook, you have 3 seconds to grab people's attention. In the first 10 seconds is where you need to have your main point that you want to make, and in the first 30 is where you elaborate a little bit more on what they need to know. And then after the 30 is where you really have them to keep watching.
Sure.
You hook hook them.
Hook 'em.
Yep,
Cool.
absolutely.
And last one, how do you keep suspense for the second or third story if you are closing the initial story?
Ooh,
How do you keep people watching?
most of the times it's the to be continued, right? You want to leave them, it's what we call in storytelling a cliffhanger, right? So you want to give them like almost everything, and then you're like, I'm not sure if anyone is watching The Voice or something. That happens quite frequently on The Voice. Like,
Happens in every TV
they would have you to see someone coming up the stage and about to sing, and then they cut to the break ads. That's a cliffhanger because it makes you sit through those entire ads until they come back to the video.
And they pull on those three, that triangle before the visuals
absolutely.
and the sound.
It can be visuals, it can be sound, it can also be a dialogue. A typical cliffhanger with dialogue is by someone saying, oh, this is going to be a disaster. And then it changes to something else. And you're like, what do you mean? You didn't give me all the information, right?
Yeah.
So cliffhangers can be using that same triangle, sound, visuals, and dialogue.
Cool.
Yeah,
Fun.
it's actually fun. I would say play around with it. It's pretty cool. It's a bit dark sometimes, so be aware.
Like
be
that's
aware
your
of
style,
cliffhangers. Yeah, I feel like that was the whole theme today. But be aware of the effect that that triangle has on your entire story.
And that's it, Mel.
And that's it. And that's already the end. I feel like I had so much fun. I hope you guys had so much fun. We did in any case.
We did.
Yeah. So I guess that just leaves us with saying thank you so much for tuning in. We do hope this whole webinar was helpful. We'll be staying online for just a little longer. If you do have any questions, additional questions, please don't hesitate to put them through.
And we'd love your feedback. We'd love to run some more sessions like this. So if you have anything you'd like Mel to chat about, and I'll be the sidekick Robin, feel free to let us know and we'll hopefully put it in series.
Perfect. All right, guys, thank you so much. It was a pleasure and we'd love to see you soon.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys.